Hello and welcome to Low-Code Campfire. This is episode number 258 for Friday, August 28, 2026. And our main topic today is GOT certificates. This will be a continuation or can be a continuation of the discussion from Low-Code Cafe earlier in the week. But let's start with the start. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plantain App, and this is an event that we do almost every Friday, 10 a.m. Central Time, where we get together and talk about what's going on with Plantain App and our individual implementations, things that we're dealing with. So bring something to show, be ready to help, but we do wish that you would join us in live, and I'll just don't be intimidated. This is all skill levels are welcome. We record all these and put them on YouTube so you can watch them over and over again and go back and refer to them if there's particular topics you're interested in. Um, YouTube has a pretty good search that you can get to particular topics and find what you're looking for. So nice video documentation. That's at plantanapp.com slash, excuse me, youtube.com/plantanapp. We do this agenda week by week where we stop and say hello because we're a friendly group, and then we'll go around the campfire. Anything you want to talk about is what we call first call. Anything you've submitted in advance. We didn't have an official submission, but we do have, I know, a PayPal topic that we could talk about. And we'll hit some of these other areas around the site. And then after an hour or so, we go into Afterglow. That's where we turn off the recording and start to celebrate the fact that it is, in fact, Friday. So do engage with us. You can submit questions and topics in advance, support@plantanapp.com. Just send an email to me at there. I'll do a little bit of research if I have time, and we'll put it on the agenda to talk about. Hello, you two. Welcome.
Hello, Dale. Hello, Nico.
So we start with first call. Do you have something you want to talk about?
So, Dale, I want to say to you that I learned here in Campfire that you had submitted a contribution not too very long ago about using pictures in radio buttons,
Yeah.
and I went and used that this week, and I was very happy to have that, to have the instructions, the blueprints on how to use that, and I used it to good effect. So, thank you, Dale.
Oh, well, you're more than welcome. Let's see. Radio box survey question with images is um, the thing. So we had a couple of them set up here, but the idea was you're going to do a survey or any other kind of thing where you want instead of words for your radio boxes, the ability to pop some images in, and so uh, I did it in two different ways. One that has this styling, it's some CSS behind it that kind of nice shows the choice, and we get a green circle on the happy one and a red circle on the unhappy one. And then there's just the unstyled one where we get some images in there. But the idea is just a nice graphical interface. This came from a question that we got on support and ended up generating, explaining how to do this, and then wanting to put the pattern out there. So glad that you could take advantage of it. And I just wanted to show it from the standpoint of how do you find these techniques, right? Campfire.com, uh, campfire.plantanapp.com, and search for a contribution. So it's good to stay up with them so that you don't have to reinvent this stuff.
There are a lot of them in there, and it's a very nice resource. I go there often.
It says there's 155. I'm sure we've skipped a couple of numbers somewhere along the way. Things get deleted, but um, yeah, a lot of good stuff out there. So yeah, thanks for the mention. Welcome you late joiners. Good to see some of you back. We're
Hey guys.
still on first call if you have something you want to talk about. Um, I'm going to move on, but we can. back. Anything you want to talk about along the way? Did anybody happen to catch the client certificate Low-Code Cafe in person or in replay since Wednesday?
I was there.
Well, was it worth your hour?
Well, of course it was, Dale.
Well, it's okay to say nope, you missed the mark, but hopefully, um,
No, I think it was very valuable. It was for me, it was one of those things where I don't have a current need, but I was sure that I was going to be picking up some knowledge along the way. And so I came along for the ride and I was rewarded for it. So I'm sure your clients use that a lot, I would imagine.
we have some that do, and as with so many other things, this source is back to some work that Patrick did for us and for our client years ago. Um, but it is kind of fun that, and I'm going to jump into this with an incognito for anybody who missed it. When you browse to this test site of mine, you get asked for a certificate, and if you don't have a certificate, this is the browser. Chrome is asking me for this. If I cancel and don't give it a certificate, we can't get to the site. So if you have a back-end site that has a limited number of users, you don't want it open to the world, that's one possible use case for this. If you do have a certificate and you say OK, um, then once you do that, the site has access to your certificate information, and this is, for example, pulling out automatically the subject. See, I haven't logged in yet. I'm not logged into the site, but already the site knows who I am based on the certificate that I passed, or at least it knows what certificate I've passed. I guess that would be a more fair thing. But when I hit the login button, um, it logs me in immediately based on, well, I say immediately, it took a second. If the user was valid, this one is not valid, it would have logged me in. I'll show the login scenario here in a minute. But this page, okay, so there's two pieces of it. One is how you get to all this information out of the certificate, and that is really the focus of what we did with Plant and App. And then the second, uh, and we're providing all that as a tool for you. It's there in Campfire. I'll show in a second. But you can get all this information out of the certificate, the subject of the certificate, um, the whether or not it's valid and what the validity dates are. And there's other content that you can get out of the certificate. Um, and in this case, we're just displaying it if you don't log in, if you are not able to automatically log in. I'm going to use this same incognito browser again so I can get in and pick a different certificate. But same thing, but if I go to this login now, because it recognizes me, it just automatically logs me in. So you can get this experience of using the certificate however you get the browser to present it. You just can automatically log in or be validated against that certificate. So pretty cool stuff.
So
Uh,
Dale, I had two questions concerning that came up on Wednesday that I thought I'd talk about today, if that's okay.
Please.
One, what is prompting the pop-up that asks for the certificate that you want to use?
So because the site is configured in IIS, let me drag that over here, find it. If we go into IIS, the fact that it's been configured for in the SSL setting, oops, not this one, PAA test. In the SSL settings, there's this require certificates. And so just because the site is set up for it, it sends back a signal to the browser to say, hey, I need a certificate. And so the browser knows how to handle that. If by default it seemed, and now I'm not an expert at this, but the by default it seems to just look and see if it has any certificates and pops that window for you. From the research that I did, it appears that you can also configure the browser to automatically respond, so it wouldn't pop that window. It would just know, hey, if I get asked from this site that I need a certificate, then I'm going to pass it, and so you wouldn't have to have the user be involved in it. But I
Okay,
think that
that
was the
takes care of my next question.
yeah.
The another one that I had concerned, what if my site were set up to use the email address as the username? And because the reason I asked that is because I know, you were tying the username to the item to the certificate. So,
Right.
yep.
So if you get to choose in our scenario, we built the certificate. Let's see, we built the certificate um, as a self-signed certificate, and we had control, particularly over the subject, but you could do it in other ways. There's probably a spot where you could, but we could have put email here instead of an ID. So it's entirely possible to, um, excuse me, just a second.
Okay.
Yeah, it's entirely possible to encode into the certificate the information that you want to be able to draw from.
Okay. That works.
So if you're self-signing, yep, you could put an email address in and then you could sign in relative to the email address. You'd probably even be able to skip a step that I did, which is, let's see, let me get logged in as a,
But does this mean that there's going to be a certificate for each user of the system? I
um,
think it does.
yeah, yes, in that scenario, you'd have to have some scenario where you generate the certificate and get it to them. Uh,
That makes sense with the attrition and new people coming and going. So it does
mhm.
sound like a little bit of a management task to keep track of the certificates.
I think the
Yep.
the scenario would be that you have a an enterprise system where all the computers are controlled by a central IT department, and that's how the certificates get on the system, or a hardware device that users use to that the certificate gets pulled from the hardware device, something along
Like
those
that
lines.
card reader that Dale was talking about on Wednesday.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Dale. I did not actually go to the to the
That's
cafe, so I
that's
didn't know you were. Yeah,
yeah. Well,
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
mentioned it, but really, I
yeah.
took so this was a plant and app focused discussion, meaning we didn't really talk about all the different ways that you or how to configure. We talked about the different things some things that might be possible. Uh, and let's see, I gave out a link. Sorry, give me just a second. For Cafe 99 199. I haven't put it in the list yet, but there's two different workflows there, and also this is the PowerShell that I used in the cafe to self-sign. So if you were to use this, for example, Mark, if you wanted to go with a self-sign and you had a handful of people that you were managing and it wasn't a big deal, you could change the subject to include an email address and just run it through PowerShell. It's going to create the certificate. But this is to, you know, give you a starting point. You could make it be valid for 10 years or whatever, but it would just, um, yeah.
Could you put
Um,
this together with something like Active Directory interaction where you only have one certificate for the organization, but yet the Active Directory would identify the user and I could go look up a database to see if that's an approved user or not, or
um, I believe so. The question is, on the server, you have to decide, you either have to trust a specific certificate or provide some path of trust. So, well, whatever you're considering your certificate authority, and setting up the ability to generate certificates. If you have one of those, whether it's commercial or one that you set up yourself, and then you say, I trust this authority, then you don't have to configure each user on the server. They would just come in and say, okay, I trust where the certificate came from. And so you would have to get a certificate generated for the user, but you wouldn't have to generate and import a certificate for them. They would all rely on one trusted authority. Um,
Sure.
yeah.
Sounds good. I see a lot of possibilities there.
Um, Within this, I wanted to show that um, the starting point, we have this authentication, uh, a token that returns the subject, and this is a very simple Razor script where we just return the request's client certificate subject, turn it into a string, and it's done. So it can be as simple as that. Um, what I, the resource that I've provided uh, as a starting spot is one that has no inputs but has all kinds of outputs. So whether or not the certificate is present, and the subject, the same thing that we were looking at a second ago, um, and then whether or not it's within validity and when it starts and stops validity, and whether or not it's self-issued. So it's a good starting point. Plus the all of the JSON that comes back from the certificate to make it very accessible for you to use. So if you need something that I didn't pull out as an output, you could find it and pull it out yourself out of the different sections that are available in the certificate. Yeah, it'd be a good starting spot. Was that all your questions, and anybody else have one? We're trying to we are working at doing some additional government work, and this is something that's pretty common within that environment. So getting good, having it as a tool in the tool belt is good for us. And so spending an hour showing that we know how to do that was certainly worthwhile to us. All right, what else? I have another one that I think this is showing off some more Forms 2.0. Let's see if I can do this. Some features from our new Forms product. Ugh, never mind. I'm going to let that go in the background and show it off in another place. So, upgrade in progress. Um, I have a very simplistic example here, and we can kind of play with it. But um, Plantain App is taking a new approach into localization. So the idea that if you have a form and the English version asks for phone and has a button push me, and we go into a different locale, that it automatically, the form shows a different content for that. So it's an internationalization capability, and that was part of Action Form, but it's a little bit painstaking. Anybody use this that happens to be on the call? The ability to localize. So it becomes particularly important if you're running an international site, or a site that, like in Europe, where they speak multiple languages commonly. So we've taken a new approach to this. The old approach, DNN has in the site settings. This is the old approach, right? I'm just showing that it's here. This is the place where you turn on languages. And so we have two languages turned on for this. And there's a button for translation. So um, you would open this up and find the key that you want to change, and it would you could set up your localization there. And so it's a pretty non-transportable or yeah, it's not a convenient structure. So we've tried to make it convenient, and I think there's new. I think what we're using is a new standard, not one that we invented, but rather one that we're taking advantage of. So, first of all, the designer experience is that we have a selector, all the languages that are available in the system. Actually, I should start at the start. There is a localization section in settings that you can turn on or off. And if you turn it on, you get the selector showing the languages. And so as you're designing, you can see what this, um, it was interesting. Oh, uh, the browser is letting me know that it's translating it for me, so it's untranslating what work. I gotta figure out how to make that not do that. Um, Undo. Okay, there it is. All right. Don't translate Romanian. All right. So it's funny. We're doing it, and then it's the browser is undoing it. All right. So now that we're back to the good experience. So as we're designing, we can see what it looks like, and we can set. Um, for example, the label of this thing is called phone. The label of the button is called push me. Um, the process to localize, we're still tinkering with this a little bit. It could change it a little bit, but I think it's mostly set. There is a translation document that is the uh, definition. And let me find it here in my files. Nope, I didn't want to do that. There's some overlap with that extension, and publisher thinks it should open that. So I'm going to open this with Notepad. Okay. So this is the master translation document that says that the message ID, which is my phone title, is phone, and the push me button title is push me. The values that you put in here will become your translation. So I'm being a little bit lazy here, right? I'm not actually doing the translation, but I'm just showing off that whatever we type in the message string is going to be translation. And I am going to save this change. There is, let's put this aside. So there is a, where is it? Get my form back open again. In our localization section, there is a load button, and actually it looks like it needs to be called a PO, not a POT. So I'm going to rename this thing. But now I can. Let's see if I can. Language header. Okay, this. Maybe I don't know exactly what I'm doing with this yet, so I'm going to do it another way. There is already a document. This is the master document, and evidently I don't know what I'm doing with it. This is the translation to Romanian document that we can download, and it's apparently in the right format. So now I can open this with Notepad, and so here's the message ID of push me gets translated to whatever we put in here, so that when we save it and upload the translation, load it back in, see the values come here. So what this means is the form can be defined in one language, like English. You can get out a document that has all of your translations that are required, and you can you can have somebody or something like an AI add the translation and load it back in, and now the one form does um, can be used in multiple places. But first of all, does that excite anybody as much as it does me? Probably not.
Well, you know it does, Dale.
Oh, you're so nice to me.
What this, but what is the phone field just demonstrating a field that could be in a form, or are you looking at the
Yep.
format of the phone number to see which country you're going to translate into or something
Well,
fancy like
actually,
that?
I'm focusing on the localization piece, which says, I mean, the phone number will adapt automatically to, or can automatically adapt to the language in use, right? But let's do an example. Maybe it'll become a little bit more clear. By the way, we now have copy field, so that's nice. So we have let's say we
Yeah,
wanted to.
and I missed when you press that push me, how does it know which language to push into?
Yep.
Sorry, I
So
missed that.
sure. I'm just going to work my way through one. So I've added two new fields, and this red icon here is saying I don't have a localization for Romanian for this field, right? Because I've just added it in English, and it doesn't know what the right translation is in Romanian yet. But the form will work right away. So I've saved it. We're getting this error here that's letting you know that um, that there are missing translations. So once you turn on localization, it's trying to make sure you have everything covered. So now let's go back to the form. This construct within the URL tells it which it's going to present. So ENUS is English in the US dialect, and um, that's the signal that it's using to say which of these translations to prevent. If I say RORO, which is Romanian, then it's going to present the Romanian version of the form. Since I haven't yet defined first name, last name, we're getting translations on the things that have translations and um, English on the others. So we're halfway there, right? We need to do the translation now for these two things. And imagine that you defined a full and complete form with 30 fields and you're ready to do the translation. You're ready to do a final presentation. We can um, go to the translation and download the Romanian as it is today. And I'm going to open it. So we'll edit it in Notepad And so what we get is the translations that have been done are there, but the new things that we've added are not there. They're there with blanks, and so they're ready to be translated. And so you could use a tool like ChatGPT to say, so now we're getting everything that we had, but now first name, last name has a translation, right? So we can copy this content and put it back into our file. And we'll load the file into our form. And so now when we're designing, we can work as if we are we can see it in Romanian, what it's going to look like. We can see it in English, what it looks like. And then when we're using it, if we have the Romanian selector here, then now we're seeing the translation. Okay. It's a work in progress. We're going to do some things, I think, to make it even a little bit nicer. But your takeaway should be if you're doing an international form and you get it all done in one language, you can export it and send it to a translation service and um, get the translations loaded back in. So with just a couple of steps, you can have the same form in many languages.
I like that feature, Dale. That's very nice. It's all in one text document. It's very
We
useful.
have we have there's actually several levels of localization that need to happen, and we're working on all of them. Um, there's a different level that says there's some actions or there's some things that you can do, like, and actually a good one to show off is, or an area where there's problem. Let's say that we add a required field validation to the first name. You got to type first name. So somebody does this and they try to submit, and you get first name is required. This message comes from Plant an App, right? We've decided that when you don't have, if you use the required thing, we say, whatever the field name is required. Um, so that's a translation of the things that we provide. We've done that. We're You can do that today in action form using the old localization mechanism I was started to show you a little earlier. Those things are there and available to do that. In the new Plantain app, we're going to reveal them in a similar fashion, where it's going to be using a translation document, the POT type extension. And so you'll be able to do your own localization for whatever language you want. So that's one level. The second level of being able to translate the entire document, the fields within, um, like the labels and some of the content of things. Um, that is, if you want to do that in action form today, we know that some people, for example, use tokens to say, well, if I'm on an English site, I'll present the English value, and a Romanian site, present the Romanian value. But we don't support it natively like we've done with this PO extension document. So I know that, for example, one of our large customers has a site that has many translations, and they actually their solution to this was to build different forms for their different languages, even though it does the same thing, which is a lot of effort. So being able to do the translation and put all your maintenance into one form instead of if you have a site that has 5 languages, now you got to have 5 forms that you got to keep synchronized. It's a lot of effort. So I think this, for some use cases, is going to save a lot of effort. Just pointing out some of the signals that we had earlier. Now this has turned green. It's localized in all languages, and there isn't a warning icon up here anymore. So we see that this localized form is fully. We have all the languages that the site supports are localized. So I think it's an interesting direction. Okay. I'm not sure whether there was anything on the community forum recently. Let's take a look. This is from a week ago. I don't know if it was there when we had this meeting, probably. So this is something that's commonly available within the bind expressions of the validation, or this the required validation. So something that's commonly available, it just maybe wasn't working in this very old version of our older products. So not much new on the forum. And we've already looked at Campfire, but nothing new since the 13th. I talked about this one already, the ability to back up a table. And yeah, I need to make a contribution. Okay, before I'm gonna, if you don't stop me, I'm gonna do some grunt work. So if somebody has a better question, something to work on, actually I know. I'm gonna harken back to a support ticket. I'm not gonna get into silly things. There was a support ticket this week talking about PayPal and our PayPal action. Let's see if we have a PayPal action on the site. Or PayPal example. Nope, we got Stripe, but it's essentially the same problem. So let's take a look at it. So we have a buy now form. People fill in the blanks. You click buy now, and it's going to do a transaction with Stripe. Let's do it. So we're going to buy an item, and it's got a reference ID. This is, just a very simplistic form. When we click buy now, notice that's got a credit card that we can use here. So I'm going to copy that so we can actually get through a dialogue. But notice that it's passed me to Stripe to do the work. So this is both PayPal, Stripe, payment methods. It's a pretty common scenario that you don't process the credit card on your own site so that um, you don't have to do the conformity to to make sure you're handling things. Somebody help me, whatever the merchant stuff that you have to do on a site. So
compliance.
PCI, is that what you said?
Yes.
Yes. So I want to pay it with a card. Use this and pay. Well, this wants everything. There was a pop-up there that, okay. So you're off at Stripe, and then once the processing takes place, we should be transferred back to our website. Okay, so it's happy. It brings us back to the website and to whatever address that we told it to send it to. So when you have that intermediary scenario where you start a transaction, you got to go somewhere else, and with both Stripe and PayPal, those send an API call back to let us know how things went on the payment, whether you succeeded or failed. That those things use a mechanism within Plantain app that you should know if you use it. It helps to understand it a little bit. Now I got to find my way back to the page that where we had the form, and so you can see it. So that's the setup, and the form. We had our fields. We had a buy now button. We um, we have the Stripe checkout action, and so we have all of our setup on Stripe for whatever Stripe is that says how we're going to how we want this transaction to go through. And we have a success URL, a cancel URL. So this is how we got to the success page. If I'd hit cancel, we'd gone to a cancel page. But you can't rely on the idea that they went to a Stripe success page, that they got to that page as proof that they paid, right? Because somebody could know your URL. So you need to we have this section called on webhook call that says what you want it to do. Stripe will issue a call to your site at a very specific URL. You have to do the setup right. But if Stripe does that call, you get the opportunity to act. And so at that point, you can examine the information that comes from Stripe and decide, yes, they did actually pay, and then decide to do your fulfillment. So this would be the right place to either record that and do your fulfillment, or record it and set up a fulfillment process to take place. So anybody have questions about the setup? Because now I'm going to get to the problem. The problem, this looks pretty straightforward, where you can put actions here on your webhook call, but this happens not connected to your session that your buyer is in. The buyer, after they leave PayPal and comes back to your site, or Stripe, PayPal, whichever the provider is, in this case, Stripe. Stripe on its own schedule will send this webhook call, and it might happen immediately. It could happen at some point in the future to say, yep, the payment went through. And so there's this disconnected thing that happens. We want these actions to run when that happens, whenever it does. And when we do that, there's variables that we have access to, and we could have variables that came from the form, tokens that came from the form. And so the way that Plantain app handles this out of the box is no, the way it handles it, regardless, is to put these actions and the information from your form, it encodes them, it records them, and puts it in a table somewhere. So at the time that you click the button, it puts these actions into um, a table in the database so that it knows how to respond when that transaction comes through from the processor, Stripe. The problem that can arise and that happened on support is that if you make a mistake in these actions, or you want to change these actions, they apply to future transactions because these actions are stored in your form and are propagated into a place so that they're ready to accept a transaction whenever it comes in. But there is no mechanism that says, well, if I change my on webhook call section to go back and do something with those actions that were stored. So the support case that I'm trying to get to is there was a mistake made in the on webhook call. It wasn't coded as desired, and so when one or two or 100 transactions went through on the site, the remembered instructions at the time the buyer was going through the form were wrong, and they remain out there, and there's really no way to change them, and so that can be problematic. So I would say the first best thing is if you're using any of these things that end up having an on webhook call and that persist those for a later transaction, you need to test thoroughly to make sure that it's doing the right thing before you publish and let people go through with transactions, because it will um, it, it's not easy to unwind.
So Dale, I would like to add a detail in that if this on web hook call stack doesn't complete thoroughly or all the way, then Stripe is going to receive a 302 code in return, and it's going to be incomplete. And then it's going to log that, and then it's going to try again. And then it's going to try again, and then it's going to try. But every time it tries, it's going to get the same response because this stack wasn't right when it was built. So you're stuck in the retry. And
And
yeah, in my case, I had database changes going on in that stack and emails being sent out, and all that kept happening over and over because Stripe kept retrying.
and in your case, it was the final action that was throwing it off. So
Yeah, it was the final action. Yep.
so you got through all the things that you needed to do fulfillment, and then it blew up.
Hmm.
So between us, we came up with a potential solution to that. All these things are encoded into a table in the database, and so I was able to tell you where the table was, and what did you do?
I was able to use the Stripe key for the transaction to look up the event in the database table you referred me to, and I could find one and only one appropriate record in there that matched that key, and I deleted it. And as a result, the next time Stripe tried to send send a retry to my form, it couldn't find any instructions on how to handle it. So instead of a 302, which is a failure, it returned a 500, which was there are no instructions here, I'm giving up. And so it just stopped trying after that, which was actually my goal. I wanted it to stop trying. So that was okay. Once I tracked all that down. However, I would go on to say that the amount of time that Stripe attempts to do that is limited. It's only like several days. So if you can just put up with it happening for a little while, this problem goes away on its own.
But in the meantime, if it's sending out an email to you or to your client, they might be
Hmm.
seeing it over and over again and worry, did I get charged again? Or
That's exactly what I was concerned about. They're worried that they're being charged over and over. And I had to go clean out duplicate records in a database too.
yep. Um,
Ben's
Ben,
got his hand up. I'm sure he's gonna fix it.
jump in, please.
I've never used the auto payment stuff in Planted app, so I have a question before I say anything else because again
Please.
I'm ignorant on this
And I'll try to answer. I'm pretty
method.
ignorant too.
So to understand this on Webhook call, basically everything in this action stack basically gets stored in a database, and it says so when the payment goes through, whatever payment method you used sends back its own ID or whatever. That's what matches up to this stack of actions to then let Planted App know, okay, payment's been successful. So now the stack of actions that is linked to this ID, process them. Is that what this is doing?
Well, no. It's actually at the point when you submit the um when you transfer to Stripe, it's creating a copy of this stack of actions and encoding it into a table. So it's not a pointer, it's a copy. And so that's the problem. If the instructions are wrong, they're cached inside this table and there's no if it were a pointer, then changes to this webhook call would fix the problem. But it's not a pointer, it's a cached copy.
What? Okay, maybe I'm still not quite understanding. So the list of actions, they exist on in our database, not at Stripe.
Correct.
Okay. So knowing that's I think this is an idea, but again, correct me if I'm wrong. So let's just say for argument's sake, the stack of actions that we put in here is instead of a stack of actions, one of two things. Either a call to a workflow or an insertion of data to a specific table so that it's just one call and it doesn't matter, I would think, that you change what it's calling. So like if let's say it's a workflow, if you change the workflow, the call to the workflow will always be the same. It always carries the same information. But if you change the workflow because there was a mistake in it, then the next call will work correctly because it's calling that same workflow. It's just you fix the workflow. Or the other idea was if you inserted information into a table, do a automation trigger on insert of record on table, and same idea, have that automation have its stack inside it. And if you made a mistake in that stack, if you fix it, the next time it triggers, it will run the correct stack. Am I completely wrong in that idea?
You're not wrong, and it's at least half of the solution, right? If you abstract the logic into another thing that you can then modify, then uh, if this was a execute workflow, that's the easiest case to talk about. If this were an
Mhm.
execute workflow, the workflow that you called isn't copied. It's calling the current version, and so yes, you could update the logic. Um, but you're still stuck with if if you miscode this section, whatever you do in this section um, remains forever. You can't. I'm sorry. The whatever you do in this section when uh, it create in your scenario would take a copy of the execute workflow action and encode it into a transaction that's waiting to be executed when um, when Stripe calls back. So if you make a mistake in that, or subsequently delete the workflow, for example, or didn't get the right variable, you're calling a workflow and you're passing variables into the workflow and you didn't code the workflow correctly, code the variables that you're passing correctly, um, then you're stuck in the same situation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you call the abstraction incorrectly or you change the abstraction, I could see that's the same exact situation. But
Mhm.
let's just say, for argument's sake, your steps taken of what has to be done when it comes back, if that's
Mhm.
where the mistake was in the actual work, if you abstract it, and as long as the abstraction doesn't change, you can fix the
Yes.
offending
So
action within that process.
right. So I think that's a better design than putting all of your actions here. That is certainly one solution that would get you closer to being able to adapt it as you need to. Absolutely.
I think that's brilliant. That really would have solved the problem that I was in. Um, yeah, if my actions were all in a workflow, I could have updated them and had different outcomes.
Yep.
I think it's a great idea.
And you could even you could get sophisticated with that and put some versioning in there so that if you needed old transactions to go through in the old way and new transactions to go through in the new way, you could adapt that as well. Um,
That would work especially good in recurring transactions because you might need to change your mind a year later on what happens with a recurring when it recurs.
hmm hmm um, yeah, so this is just kind of one. I mean, I bring it up today because it's kind of an interesting nuance of what goes on. Plant an app um, makes this stuff easy for you to do, but there are some things behind the scenes, the way that it did it, the fact that it encodes all of your context as well as these actions so that you have at a later time, you have access to uh, that information um, has consequences, right? So um, in the and there's another thing that again it can kind of be confusing. Um, the actions that happen on the on this on webhook call are happening, and they're not happening to the user and the browser session they're in. So there's some things that you can't do. You can't have a display toast message or a go to a different URL as part of your webhook call because that thing is happening somewhere else completely disconnected from the user. And that in fact is one of the ways you can miscode this section to have it blow up, right? If you had a redirect to URL on the um, as an event here, it would it wouldn't make any sense in the context of the API call that it's and so that the API blows up and you get a what'd you say it was a 302 or so.
Yeah, we got to.
So it's just understand we make this stuff easy, but there are consequences. You just have to understand the nuances. Most of the time it works out well, but if you haven't tested it and turn it loose, it can cause you some problems.
The details are important, as usual.
My brother used to say it's always a little bit more complicated than you think. With that, I thank you for spending your hour and listen mostly to me drone out about product things, but hopefully it brings you 1 inch closer to understanding Plantain app. If you have a minute, hang around. We'd love to talk to you during Afterglow, but thanks for joining.